For 10 years, Jenny Miller's life had followed the same narrow path. At 29, she lived above the pharmacy in a quiet Kansas town where change came slower than the seasons. Her mornings began before dawn, her feet carrying her 3 blocks through chilled air to Rosie's diner. She tied on the same faded blue apron, polished the counter until her reflection stared back, and greeted the same regulars who never asked how she was really doing. Loneliness didn't startle her anymore. It had settled in like wallpaper, always there, never spoken of. Her parents were long gone. Her father had died when she was 15, her mother 2 years later. The aunt who stepped in afterward had done her best, but grief had a way of making good people distant. Eventually, the aunt moved to Arizona to chase warmer air and kinder joints, and Jenny was left behind with a drawer full of Christmas cards and occasional calls that always ended too quickly. Jenny's apartment held no pets, no plants, and no one waiting for her at the end of the day. Only yellowed photographs, unopened letters, and the quiet ache of waiting for something unnamed. She filled the space between her shifts with crossword puzzles, discount romance novels, and the familiar hum of old sitcom reruns. It wasn't a bad life. But it wasn't much of one either. Then, on an ordinary October morning, the boy appeared. He was small, maybe 10, maybe younger. Eyes alert but guarded, like he'd already learned too much about how unpredictable the world could be. He took the corner booth farthest from the door, where the sunlight came in soft and slow. A backpack too large leaned beside him like a burden he hadn't chosen. His clothes were clean but worn, knees patched, sleeves rolled slightly too high. And always, without fail, he ordered only water. Every morning, always at 7:15. Jenny didn't ask questions. Not then. She simply brought the water with a smile and a paper straw. The first time, he nodded so slightly she wondered if she imagined it. By the third morning, she'd started slipping him a napkin folded into a triangle, tucking a paper crane inside when no one was looking. He never unfolded it, just placed it beside his glass and continued reading from a battered paperback that looked older than he was. It wasn't until the 15th day that Jenny set down a plate of pancakes in front of him. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, making a show of glancing toward the kitchen. "The cook made an extra. I'll just leave it here instead of throwing it away." The boy looked up, suspicion and hunger flickering like a storm in his expression. Jenny smiled again, gentle, practiced, and walked away before he could speak. From behind the counter, she watched his fingers hover over the fork, then grip it tightly, then bring the first bite to his mouth with the desperation of someone who didn't believe in free meals. When she returned 10 minutes later, the plate was empty, his book open again, eyes averted. He didn't thank her, not with words. But his shoulders, once tight as wire, had lowered just enough to break her heart. The next day it was scrambled eggs and toast. The day after that, oatmeal with brown sugar. Each morning brought a new mistake from the kitchen, served quickly, quietly, without a receipt or a bill. The boy never asked for anything, never started a conversation beyond a hushed thank you. But he ate every bite, sometimes so quickly it looked like he feared it might vanish if he blinked. Jenny didn't try to pry. Something in his posture, the way he angled himself to watch the door and window at the same time, told her that questions would only drive him away. Instead, she made sure his water glass stayed full, the pancakes were warm, and that the diner felt like a place where he could breathe just a little easier for 40 minutes each morning. Sometimes, when the diner was quiet and the boy was immersed in his book, Jenny allowed herself to wonder, did he live nearby? Did he have family? Why was he always alone? And why did hunger seem like such a familiar companion to him? But she pushed those thoughts away. In her experience, kindness with conditions wasn't kindness at all. By the 4th week, a rhythm had formed, like a small ritual between two people who understood the power of silence. The boy arrived. Jenny served him. No questions. No expectations. Just breakfast, warmth, and peace. But not everyone saw it that way. "Who's that kid you keep feeding?" Harold, a retired postal worker and lifelong regular, asked one morning. He nursed his black coffee like it was the last cup on earth. Never seen his parents. Don't look like he belongs around here. Jenny offered a small shrug. Just a kid on his way to school. Harold snorted. Kids today expect handouts. Soft. World's going downhill. She didn't answer. She just refilled his cup. Later, in the back kitchen, Kathy, who worked the grill, cornered her while wiping down a prep station. You're feeding a stray, she said, not unkindly, just flat. Like someone who'd seen good intentions backfire before. You give handouts, they never learn gratitude. He'll just disappear one day. They always do. Jenny nodded but didn't engage. Instead, she folded a clean napkin and slipped it into her apron pocket. That day, she served French toast with warm syrup and didn't explain why. She had been that hungry once. She remembered the way people looked at her when they realized she needed help but offered none. That memory never left. It lived in her bones. She didn't do it for praise. She didn't post photos or tell her friends. Most mornings, she barely spoke 10 words. But she showed up, made space, and brought food to someone who needed it. And for a while, that was enough. Until the whispers began. Let me know if this tone, length, and development works for you, or if you'd like any shifts before I begin. By the 6th week, people began to notice. Most said nothing, but silence in a small town is rarely empty. It fills with assumptions, quiet disapproval, and sideways glances that speak louder than any confrontation. Whispers rose behind Jenny's back like a slow storm. Some were murmured over steaming mugs of coffee. Others came through the thin walls of the break room or beneath the clatter of plates being stacked. A few regulars had started calling the boy stray, echoing Kathy's words. One man, always in a pressed suit and tie, shook his head every morning as he watched the boy eat. Kids these days expect everything for free, he muttered one morning to no one in particular. Back in my day, we earned our breakfast. Jenny pretended not to hear. But she did. She always did. One morning, the owner of Rosie's Diner, Mr. Ballard, pulled her aside after the morning shift ended. He was a man of receipts, routines, and little tolerance for gray areas. He didn't ask how she was or offer her a chair. I've noticed the extra orders, he said, tapping the side of a clipboard. You've been running a loss on inventory for over a month. Jenny didn't flinch. It's nothing. Just a plate here and there. That adds up, he replied, flipping through pages. This isn't a shelter. You understand that, right? She nodded. Not an agreement, just acknowledgement. People are asking questions, he continued. Makes us look unprofessional. Like we're letting anyone walk in and take what they want. We can't afford that reputation, not in this town. Jenny met his gaze calmly. He's just a kid. Ballard's jaw tightened. We all have stories. Doesn't mean we get free pancakes. If you want to help him, do it on your time, not the restaurant's. She didn't argue. She just went back to wiping down the counter. That afternoon, she brought in a small lunchbox from home with a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a sealed note that simply read, "You are seen." The next morning, the boy didn't come. Nor the one after that. For 5 days, his corner booth remained empty. Jenny still turned over his glass at 7:15 each morning, just in case. She still prepared a small breakfast and kept it warm on the side shelf, hidden from view. But the seat stayed vacant, and a strange silence settled into the rhythm of the diner, an emptiness louder than clanging dishes and hollered orders. By the 6th day, Jenny walked to the elementary school 3 blocks away during her break. She sat on the bench across the street, watching children spill onto the playground, bright coats zipping past in a blur of laughter and backpacks. She didn't see him. She almost turned to leave when she caught a glimpse, a small figure near the edge of the building, sitting alone beneath a bare-limbed tree, reading. She knew that posture. Knew the slump of shoulders that had learned not to expect kindness. He wasn't eating. Just reading, half hidden in shadow. Jenny returned to the diner, said nothing, and finished her shift. The next morning, she packed the lunchbox again. Sandwich. Fruit. Granola bar. A paper crane tucked inside. She didn't take it to the diner. She took it directly to the school office, placed it on the secretary's desk, and said only, "For the boy under the tree." The secretary raised an eyebrow. "Which boy?" "You'll know." She left before she could be questioned. The boy returned to the diner the next morning. He didn't sit. He hovered near the door, backpack clutched tightly in both hands. His shoes were muddy, his cheeks red from cold. Jenny walked over, calm and slow, as if greeting an old friend. "I'm sorry," he said in a whisper, barely audible. Jenny shook her head gently and handed him a small paper bag from behind the counter. The routine resumed. Quietly. Carefully. Each day, Jenny made sure the food was covered by her own tips. She marked the meals under her own employee tab, which meant smaller paychecks, but she didn't care. And the town noticed again. Only this time, it wasn't whispers. One morning, as the boy ate oatmeal with cinnamon, a woman with a fixed smile and a pinched expression approached the counter. "Excuse me," she said to Jenny. "I think it's very sweet what you're doing, but is it appropriate? He's not your child. Some might say it's a little strange. A grown woman taking interest in a boy with no guardian around." Jenny felt the room freeze around her. The spoon in the boy's hand stilled. Even the sound of the coffee machine seemed to pause. "He's hungry," she replied softly. The woman raised her eyebrows. "Still. People talk. Just trying to help you before things get out of hand." Jenny gave her a small nod, then turned away. The woman didn't order anything. She left moments later, her heels clicking a judgmental rhythm across the floor. The next morning, a folded flyer appeared on the bulletin board near the entrance. It read, "Diner or daycare? Should Rosie's be serving strangers' kids?" No name. No signature. But the damage was done. Customers began choosing other booths. Tips grew lighter. Kathy stopped chatting during prep. Even Ballard avoided eye contact when handing out the schedule. Jenny continued serving. Continued cooking the meals herself when the kitchen was busy. She made sure the boy always had a clean plate and a quiet place to eat. But now, every act of kindness was done beneath a shadow. And yet, each morning, the boy arrived. And each morning, Jenny made sure he left full. Two weeks after the story broke, Rosie's diner was unrecognizable. The same counter Jenny had wiped down each morning was now the backdrop for television crews. Reporters stood where Harold used to grumble about his coffee, narrating stories about quiet kindness in small-town America. A photo of the paper crane was featured on local news broadcasts and national morning shows alike. It became a symbol, shared, reposted, printed on posters and pinned in classrooms. And yet, through all the noise, Jenny stayed absent. She didn't return calls. Didn't answer messages. Didn't speak to reporters camped outside the pharmacy door. She kept showing up at the library, at the shelter, at the school lunch program. She said little, worked much, and listened more. But someone had noticed her silence. Someone who hadn't forgotten what it meant to be hungry and invisible. It was the boy's uncle, Michael Ames, a school janitor by day and a Marine veteran who had long kept his struggles private. The clip of his nephew eating pancakes at the diner had shaken him. It reminded him of his own childhood, of the years he'd spent trying to be invisible so people wouldn't ask questions he couldn't answer. He reached out, not to Jenny, but to someone higher. It took a week of calls. A few favors. A contact still active in the National Guard. And then one morning, before sunrise, the center of town stirred with unfamiliar activity. At 6:30 a.m., long before the diner opened, a military jeep rolled down Main Street. Its tires crunched softly over fallen leaves. Parked directly outside Rosie's diner, the doors opened in silence. 4 uniformed service members stepped out. Behind them came a truck with no markings. Just one wooden crate, carried carefully, reverently, between 2 officers. The mayor arrived 10 minutes later, looking nervous and underdressed. The local sheriff stood beside him. A crowd formed, early commuters, retired locals, students. And then, emerging from the back of the pharmacy, still clutching a tote bag filled with library books, came Jenny. She stopped on the sidewalk, confused. People stepped aside. Someone motioned her forward. And then, from the center of the gathering, the crate was opened. Inside lay a plaque, polished oak, engraved brass, simple words. In recognition of uncommon compassion in common times. Beneath the inscription, her name. Alongside it, a folded American flag. The officer nearest her, an older man with silver at his temples, spoke gently, just loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear. Miss Millers, this is presented to you on behalf of the United States Armed Forces for your unwavering demonstration of civilian honor. What you gave wasn't just breakfast. You gave dignity. Jenny said nothing. She just looked down at the flag, her hands shaking slightly. Then she raised her eyes, met the gaze of the boy in the crowd, standing next to his uncle. His hands were clean. His coat zipped. And for the first time, he wasn't alone. He stepped forward, pulled something from his pocket, and placed it in Jenny's palm. A small dog tag. Weathered. Scratched. This was my mom's, he said. She served. You reminded me of her. Jenny closed her fingers around it, lips pressed tight, tears building but unspilled. The mayor stepped up, cleared his throat, and addressed the crowd. Because of Jenny's actions, this town is changing its policy. Effective immediately, any child seen alone and in need will be treated as a community responsibility. That includes meals, no questions, no judgment. Kindness isn't a liability. It's a legacy. Behind him, Ballard stood in silence. No clipboard now. Just the weight of being wrong, carried quietly like a coat too heavy to remove. Inside the diner, the booth where the boy had once sat was now reserved. A brass plate had been fastened to the table's edge. This seat is for the child who reminded us what hunger looks like, and the woman who reminded us what hope feels like. People who had once whispered began to speak openly. A local bakery offered free pastries to students before school. A mechanic down the road created a fund for families in need of transportation. Someone launched a Jenny Fund online to support free breakfasts at the diner indefinitely. Jenny didn't ask for any of it. She returned to her routine slowly, carefully. Her hours at the diner were never restored, but she was offered a new role, community liaison. She helped connect struggling students to quiet resources. She trained volunteers in how to serve with empathy. But every morning, at exactly 7:15, she still passed by the booth in the corner and turned over a glass. Just in case. One morning, a visitor from out of town walked in and pointed to the plaque on the wall, asking the waitress who Jenny was. The girl behind the counter smiled and pointed to the woman helping a child tie their shoelaces near the door. She's the one who never asked for a thank you, she said. That's how you know it mattered. The town never forgot. Because some stories don't fade. They ripple through buildings, through policies, through generations. Not because the hero demanded it, but because she never once did. And somehow, that made the whole world take notice. Kindness without question is enough.